American wilderness is more than a collection of mesmerizing landscapes and incredible animals. It's a gift, and like any precious gift, it must be preserved. At the turn of the 20th century, this land was under threat. Species were vanishing, habitats were being destroyed, and the idea of conservation barely existed.
But a group of visionaries changed everything. They saw that hunting wasn't just a way to gather resources, it could be a way to protect wildlife around us. They understood that a balance was essential, a balance that shaped the modern conservation movement.
Join us as we explore the lives and legacies of wildlife expert and conservationist George Bird Grinnell and President and naturalist Theodore Roosevelt. Their passion for the natural world and their determination to protect it forever changed our understanding of conservation. This is their story.
George Bird Grinnell and Teddy Roosevelt had a significant impact on American conservation and the founding of the Boone and Crockett Club, which not only emphasized our rights as hunters, but our responsibilities as well. The Boone and Crockett Club teaches us to appreciate nature while also helping it. Their vision of ethical hunting and responsible stewardship laid the foundation for modern conservation today. In the time of Roosevelt and Grinnell, hunting was unrestricted, and any animal was legal to kill. Nowadays, there are strict rules when it comes to hunting. There are limits to how many animals you can catch. There are areas where it's illegal to hunt. Some species are fully off limits. Even with these rules, there are still ways for people to hunt more animals than necessary. This just goes to show how laws and regulations are not strict enough, and the fact that we still need people to fight for the protection of nature shows how little we have progressed in these past 200 years. However, America has had some victories in the world of wildlife protection, which was a treaty between Britain and America to protect the migratory bird species during migration. The Endangered Species Protection Act, signed by Richard Nixon in 1973, provided protection to endangered species and their ecosystems. And finally, the Alaska National Interest Land Conservation Act, which protected over 100 million acres of land in Alaska, including nature preserves, national parks, and wildlife refuges, which was also signed by Jimmy Carter in 1980. As you can see, hunting started off strictly as a way to get materials, such as meat for food, fur for clothes, and bones for tools, and then it became very out of control, and many species and ecosystems were under threat. We then started to make some progress by establishing limitations and creating laws to protect animals. In the modern day, hunting is a regulated practice, but there's still progress to make.
George Bird Grinnell is one of the most influential conservationists in American history. He was known as the father of American conservation for his efforts to help preserve America's national parks and change how we thought about nature. But let's rewind back to September 20th, 1849, when a boy named George Bird Grinnell was born. He was born in Brooklyn, New York, around when planning for the Brooklyn Bridge began. Grinnell was born into a very wealthy and influential family. His father was a very successful businessman. His mother, like many women in the mid-1800s, did not have a job. Instead, she managed the house and George's 5 siblings. Later in his life, George attended college at Yale, where he studied anthropology, literature, natural history, and biology. After college, Grinnell did some work as a journalist for local magazines. He wrote articles about conservation, Indian tribes, and cultures, and nature hikes that he went on. Grinnell's writing starting to draw a lot of attention, specifically the work that he did about conservation. His view on protecting wildlife changed the way that many people think. In 1886, Yellowstone National Park was facing a crisis. Bison numbers were at an all-time low due to overhunting. At this time, conservation was still a distant idea, so no efforts were made to save the species. This all changed when Grinnell came to Yellowstone. He saw how dire the situation was and immediately got to work. He published several magazines that talked about the bison dilemma. These magazines immediately caused a huge uproar among readers. Many people started petitioning and protesting for these animals to get government protection. In 1894, the government listened to the public and passed the Lacey Act, a law that prohibits hunting in national parks. But this was only one of the many amazing feats that George Bird Grinnell accomplished. Overall, Grinnell had one of the most significant impacts on our society of any other conservationist.
Theodore Franklin Roosevelt Jr. was born on October 27, 1858 in Manhattan. His father, Theodore Roosevelt Sr., was a wealthy businessman. He was born into a relatively large family, having 4 siblings. As a child, Roosevelt was very sickly. He suffered from severe asthma, arteriosclerosis, which is a hardening of the arteries, and bronchitis, which is the inflammation of the bronchial tubes. He eventually got treated and was much healthier by his adolescent years. Despite all the health challenges, Roosevelt was a very active person. He had a strong passion for the outdoors and a love for nature. At the age of 18, Roosevelt attended college at Harvard, where he studied biology, philosophy, and classical literature. After college, Roosevelt became a cattle rancher in North Dakota. This was the point when he knew he wanted to pursue conservation. Roosevelt started to read up on magazines and articles about conservation. He believed that he could merge conservation and hunting, his 2 biggest interests. This is when he discovered the magazine called Forest and Stream, which is written by a promising young naturalist named George Bird Grinnell. When Grinnell and Roosevelt met, they knew they wanted to combine their passions of conservation and hunting into something that can change the minds of millions of people worldwide. This is the Boone and Crockett Club. The Boone and Crockett Club is an organization that teaches people how to hunt responsibly and what rights they have as hunters. It was founded by Teddy Roosevelt and George Bird Grinnell in 1887. Roosevelt was the one who took up the initiative to start the organization because he saw the decimation of wildlife firsthand while visiting the national parks in 1883 through 1886. The club was named after the famous explorer Daniel Boone and frontiersman Davy Crockett. The club was named after them because Roosevelt and Grinnell wanted to emphasize the importance of ethical hunting and exploration. The Boone and Crockett Club pushed for the creation of national parks and many new conservation laws, such as the National Wildlife Refuge System, which provided essential homes for thousands of species in America and was created in January 1902. Today, the Boone and Crockett Club still plays an important role in helping people understand how to balance recreation and conservation. Also, the Boone and Crockett Club has their own constitution. Their constitution talks mostly about the purpose of the club as well as fair chasing, or in other words, ethical hunting, as well as the club's goals that the club wanted to accomplish. 150 years later, and conservation is still less a priority for most than it should be. Humans have been hunting for as long as we have been on the face of the earth. It was the first way we could obtain food as a species. However, hunting has changed a lot in these past 40,000 years. In the time of Homo sapiens, hunting was a necessity. It was only done to get the required food to stay alive. Unfortunately, hunting has become more of a sport than a way to get food. This is the problem that Roosevelt and Grinnell wanted to solve. They wanted people to realize that responsibilities come with being a hunter. Think of an ecosystem as a Jenga tower, and think of a species in the ecosystem as the blocks. If you're not careful, you could end up destroying the whole tower. Take the Tasmanian tiger, for example. They were hunted to extinction in the late 1930s, and as a consequence, the wallaby population boomed. This caused the wallabies to clear some ecosystems entirely of their vegetation. With the lack of greenery, some animals such as kangaroos died or were forced to leave the area. This is one of the many examples of the Jenga effect in an ecosystem. When it comes to rights, we may have less than we originally thought. Overhunting is a huge problem, and you should only kill as much as you eat. Hunting is recognized by many as a sport. To have rights, we must respect our responsibilities as well. So how does this all connect? Well, for starters, all of our subtopics revolve around rights and responsibilities, specifically the rights and responsibilities of being a hunter. We also made sure to tie our subtopics with conservation and ethics. This is shown through Grinnell and Roosevelt's vision of ethical hunting, as well as the Boone and Crockett Club and its mission to preserve nature.
To sum up our project in 5 words other than rights and responsibilities, it would be conservation, ethics, preservation, nature, and lastly, history. In conclusion, we had tremendous fun making this project, and we consider ourselves very lucky to partake in NHD.